Okay. Right. Thank you. Okay. So that's the science that goes into it. So it's not a matter of drawing a pretty picture and saying, wow, that looks good. I think I'll go and sell some plans for that, and hopefully the thing actually works. So sometimes I get a commission for a boat which is wildly different to anything that people have seen from me before, like a mini Transat racer, but it worked. In fact, it finished 3rd place in its first attempt, and it stayed in the top 10 for nearly 20 years. So that was successful, and that was designed using that process. Right. Matt, can we have the next one, please? Okay, so here we have Navigator. Now, Navigator was designed from first principles as a race trainer. So it had a great big sloop rig. It had a short centerboard so that if it wasn't exactly at the right angle of heel, training these guys, the boat would drift off, wouldn't point. And for the cruising dinghy, it works out quite well because the boat can sail into relatively shallow water with the board down and it will still make progress. I had a friend come along wanting a cruising dinghy to go quite long distances in our Hauraki Gulf, which in some respects is not dissimilar to the Anticosto passage down here, and that there is sheltered water for 40, 50 miles. So he looked through all my drawings and picked one out, and out came the drawing for that. Now, most of them have been built with a yawl rig. Now, this was for a cruising dinghy rather than a racer. So we retained the short board. It still points and still goes quite well upwind, but the yawl rig with a jib, a main and a mizzen for a cruising dinghy meant that if the weather got up, at the worst, you could reef the main, reef it again, and then drop it. So the rig is then balanced on the jib and the mizzen. It's controllable. So we're beginning to get into what I think is the theme for this is safety. The cruising dinghy has to be safe. And we were heading in that design for a boat that would be safe. And there's a video online of one being laid over on its side, pulled back up again by one person, and this is quite a big boat, reboarded and sailed off fully swamped, able to be sailed. Now, safety in a cruising dinghy is paramount. If you're going to go outside the certainty, not possibility, the certainty of immediate assistance if you're in trouble, then you must be able to self-rescue, right? Because if not, you may not survive. Simple as that. And I don't like to scare people, but be safe, yeah, people? So safety begins as a designer from the drawing board. So the buoyancy built into these boats means, one, they can't be actually sunk. Two, they float high enough to be able to bail them out once you right them. Three, the buoyancy is so distributed within the boat to fulfill its purposes. Now, the purposes are more than one. People think buoyancy, it's got to keep the boat afloat. But it has to, if, for example, the boat is fully rolled, the boat has to be able, with just the crew weight, and that's often one person, to have one side sunk so that the boat can then be pulled around onto its side and then be pulled up. Next, it's got to be such sufficient buoyancy that when it's sitting there fully swamped, that the person can climb over the side, not over the back, over the side and into the boat. Then it's got to float high enough to be able to bail it without the water pouring in, say, the centre case and filling it back up again. Right? Now, just a sidetrack, very small. I've been told by these guys, don't get sidetracked. If you're in your dinghy and you've tipped it out and it's back upright again and it's blowing hard enough to have tipped you out, you do not go around and grab the transom, because with your wet weather gear and your buoyancy aid and your body, you're a really effective sea anchor, and the wind will blow the boat bow downwind and it'll try and sail away from you, and there is no way you're going to hang on to it. So you'll be lying there in the water with your nice buoyancy aid holding you up. Bye-bye. Not a good deal. So over the side, keep the boat broadside on, go in over the side. And we have techniques for that. So, Navigator, long, fine entry, because we're often sailing in windy conditions in mostly sheltered waters, which generate a short, steep chop. A boat that is full in the forward sections won't go to windward in that because it's going butt into the waves. So long, fine entry. And it's a lot like the modern races. The run after is tucked up slightly, so downwind at speed, it raises the bow. It's like up elevator on an aeroplane. It also, that lower point being in the bottom being further back than used to be usual means that it's supporting your crew weight, because the crew tend to sit about 2/3 back. So it has several benefits. So we look then at the construction method, which lends itself to the buoyancy tanks, getting the seats in the right place, and ease of build, which goes back to the brief again. How are we going to build it? What we're going to build it out of? And so on. Are these shapes achievable? So we don't want a boat with really difficult panel shapes to develop. The average person who builds my boats are first-time builders. So there's quite a lot of instruction goes with it, and most people produce a really nice job, often better than I produce. For me, boat building, and I've just started number 38, is a way to get from this idea in here onto the paper, build it, and get it out on the water and see if this idea in here works out there on the water. So Navigator was one of those processes, but it had an extra step in the middle because of its original intention as a race trainer, which had all of the control systems and all of the sensitivities of the very advanced small racing keel boats, the really light ones. And some people will know the Elliott 5.9s, which was the fleet that these people were going to go into. So, next one, please, Matt. So, there's the picture of the Navigator with the yawl rig, and you can see sprit boom. That's there in part for sail control. It's there in part because you've got to protect these things. And we see on the AC-72s, the America's Cup boats, everybody's wearing crash helmets, and serious crash helmets, not little bicycle bump caps. So it puts the boom up out of reach of the head. It also means that the boat has a much lighter sheet loading, which means that when you're cold and fatigued and your hands are wet, you can still get the sheet in. It means that there's less stress on the mast because that triangle there of the sail and the boom acts as a vang. It takes a twist out of the sail. So we have a short stubby mast because we've got a gaff on it, and the whole lot can come down very quickly and easily because there's less tension on it. Again, that's a safety factor. Press the button, Max. Right, so there's one under sail. And you can see how the three sails each contribute to each other. You can see that the boat's very fine bow is not making a wave until well back along the waterline. You can see that it's comfortable. And comfort is a really big part of safety in a cruising sailing dinghy. Now, fatigue is a problem. People who are really tired make bad decisions. And when you're out in a cruising sailing dinghy and it's blowing up a bit and you're a little bit away from where you need to go, it's not a time to make bad decisions. So safety Comfort is a very large part of that, right? That's the safety, that's the part of safety that comes from the designer's board. I can't control what they're going to wear and how they're going to sail, but I can control the boat. And there we go. This is Joel Bergen in Upper Puget Sound. And you can see how the boat, right? How the flat bottom works, how the bow works, right? There's hardly any stern wave to it. The hydrodynamics work really well. And I've designed a number of boats along that line with that same structural method, with the flat panel bottom, rounded sides, long fine entry, fairly broad stern on the waterline, and the yawl rig. And so far, they've proven to be very safe and comfortable boats. And I've just done the raid in one, right? And that was really, really cool until we got into the parade of sail, which was a bit like playing dodgems at high speed and rough seas. Here's another shot. This is Wren. Okay, so he's gone for a conventional boom, but otherwise, much the same. Right, the boat is balanced with the main down or up. You can also sail it with the jib rolled up and the mizzen down. And it's balanced again. So that's really good for wriggling into a marina or a confined space. Outboard motors, part of the deal. If you have to be home on Monday, an alternative means of propulsion is good, but just watch how it moves. Yeah. Yeah, so we call that an air rudder. And if it's getting too heavy on the helm, as the wind gets up, and this is a fatigue issue again, as the wind gets up, you can ease the mizzen out a little bit until it goes neutral, take your hands off. It gives you a few seconds or even a few minutes at times. So you can have the boat self-steering without electronics, without fancy gear on board. It'll just truck along, which is very, very helpful. And like I say, fatigue is a major issue in safety in small boats. The really bad decisions happen when people are tired. Yep, don't get involved with those things.
Just always impressed by how well the bow lifts. Like the bow's not digging into the water, it sort of lifts, even downwind. These boats don't dig in and nosedive and bow steer. How did you achieve that, John?
Okay, the bottom panel in these, now they're flat bottomed, which people think, oh, flat bottom boat, never going to work. It's a proportion of the length. So there is a way of doing this, and the flat panel has a very long, fine entry, and it is almost straight all the way through to about here, and that's where the crew sits, okay? But this section here acts a little bit like up elevator on an airplane. So as soon as it starts to pick up speed, the stern squats very slightly, and if you're going really quickly downwind, which is when some of the real disasters happen, the boat's bow comes up. Now, if you're going to capsize in a cruising dinghy, it will probably be at speed downwind. Not upwind, because you can ease the sheet. You're going downwind at speed, you can't ease the sheet. So it's overpowered, it's going too fast, and if the bow goes down, the bow will try and steer the boat, so you get a broach. And broach is often followed by a capsize. And you can see here, he's just going fast enough for that to be happening now. And he's sitting in the ideal place for weight distribution. There's no thumping or banging or anything, it's just surging along. would you like to ask that question when we get to question time? Right, don't derail me. This is hard enough as it is. I come in here and I see the crowd and I think, run away, run away. But hey, great to be here.
You had one job there, Matt. Sorry, push it, try pushing it once
Yep.
more. Going to push it once more.
What's happening? Okay. So, Matt, what's your next question?
So I think if we move on next to the later design you did, probably one of your most iconic designs, the 11'11" Scamp, which I think there's a few kicking around here, isn't there? Anybody here with a Scamp?
There's one or two.
Oh, there's
Yep.
a few of you. Awesome. Yeah.
Yep. So, Scamp, again, I was sent a brief by the customer, which was Small Craft Advisor magazine up in the USA, for a cruising dinghy for 2 small children and their parents to sail in the lower Columbia River, which is a pretty rough place at times. It's the second biggest river on the American continent, and it runs out against the North Pacific wind blowing straight in again. So it gets pretty rough in there. So it was designed, no pictures yet, okay, with what looks like a cuddy cabin forward, but the forward part of that cuddy is actually high up buoyancy. So if the boat gets knocked down, there's a lot to help it back up again. The after part of the cuddy is big enough to sit in, and if you can sit in there with your little stove running, your Trangia or whatever, and cook up, which is helpful. The length limit meant that to get a high volume boat was going to be a little tricky. Now, if you're going to move the water aside as the boat goes through, and you're having to move it, this boat's almost half its length in beam. So length to beam ratio is 2 to 1. That's unusual in monohulls anyway. So in order to move the water that far, it takes a lot of energy. And when it comes back again, you see big waves, and that's all lost energy. So the bow section on a Scamp, with its little pram bow and its odd-looking little forefoot, rolls the water underneath the boat, where it only has to move slightly more than a handspan instead of that far. So a lot less lost energy. It runs back underneath the boat, and there's twin skegs, small keels, which have several purposes. One, that it strengthens the bottom because they're like little I-beams on edge. 2, they guide the boat, they help balance it. 3, it channels the water flow parallel to the boat's centre line instead of the high pressure water escaping out the side and forming waves. So it channels that water. Yep. So when you see a Scamp sailing, particularly light to moderate weather, it makes almost no wake. There's a little bit of fluff from the bow going through the water, a little bit of foam, but there's not a lot of wake. So very successful in that respect. So it's another boat with a big flat bottom, but they butt their way through waves. They're powerful because they're stable. They've got a big water ballast tank in them, which fills several criteria there, and they've got a really big sail for their size. But they can carry it because they're so stable. Now, just to explain about the water ballast. Water ballast fulfills 2 criteria. One is it has mass or weight very low down in the boat, and water's not particularly dense, so it's not as good as lead, and it can't, because it occupies more volume, it can't be as low as lead would, particularly if the lead was outside and on the end of a keel. But it's there, and it sure helps. The other thing is that by pulling the boat down further in the water, you get more form stability. Now, form stability is where, if, for example, you've got a 300 by 25 millimetre plank and you throw it in the water and it'll lie flat. That's form stability. If you clip a piece of lead on one edge, it'll float on edge. Get the weight right, it'll float on edge. That is ballast stability. So these little light boats that we're talking about here depend mostly on form stability. And one of the issues around designing a cruising sailing dinghy is the boat has to be able to perform, particularly sailing upwind into a chop. It must have sufficient form stability to be able to carry the sail in order to sail to windward. You need a lot of power because the wind's trying to blow you backwards. But it's also got to be fine enough to push through the waves.
Back on, John.
Cool. So here's Scamp. All right. I've had that described as the best looking stern in Port Townsend. And you can, difficult to see the bow, but on the one over to the right there, in fact, it doesn't show the little pram bow, but I'll talk about this boat in particular. My friend Howard Rice is an adventurer on steroids, real adventures. I designed the rig on that. That is quite different to the other two, as you can see. And he built it, the idea being that he was going to take the boat to Punta Arenas on the Straits of Magellan and sail it down towards Cape Horn, down the Beagle Channel. His objective was to explore the campsites of the nomadic Yagan people who lived in that area in the time of Slocum with the tacks on the deck. Yeah? Who knows, who's read Joshua Slocum? Yeah, there's quite a few hands there. So you know about the tacks on the deck. Well, those people sadly were wiped out pretty much by influenza. But he wanted to go and explore the areas where they camped. Now, in what they call the Milky Way, that is the Tierra del Fuego Western Archipelago, which ends down at Cape Horn. It's a really rugged place. So you've got a choice. You either have a huge boat, very well powered, or you have a very small boat that you pull up on shore. So we redesigned the Scamp's rig, and there's a few tricks in that one. It's got a staysail as well as a jib. Mizzen, again, is big enough to put it absolutely head to wind. So this cruising dinghy is designed very specifically for this environment. The tent there is big enough for him to sit underneath and cook. And he spent 42 days on board that boat, 11 foot 11 long, 3.6 meters. He thinks he was off the boat for maybe 3 hours in 42 days. Yeah, and he covered pretty much all of the area that he wanted to get into. It's balanced, again, main down, jib and mizzen set. It will sit absolutely head to wind, which is another benefit of the mizzen. So sheet the mizzen in hard, the boat will sit literally head to wind and just very gently sail backwards. Now that's the boat's most stable axis. So if you're in real trouble and you can heave to head to wind, your chance of being capsized is diminished considerably. Right? It won't be rolled over. There's quite a lot of other little tricks in that rig, which I'm not going to go into because I haven't got several hours, right? But bear in mind that it looks fairly ordinary, right? Tiny little ketch. It's gaff rigged. Its main mast is freestanding but has running backstays to tension the jib. One of the reasons for that, again safety, is if he's caught and the squalls in the Straits of Magellan and south are epic, he can let the main go right round and flag off the bow. He can let the mizzen go right round and flag over the cockpit and roll the jib up. So he can be pointed dead downwind with everything rolled up, nothing drawing, and that slows him down, right? He's under control. So that is a cruising dinghy designed for a very specific set of circumstances, and those circumstances and that safety was built in from my drawing board. So as the designer, that's my role in designing a safe cruising dinghy. Right, press the button, and here we go. This is Scamp number 1 on its initial sea trials, and Howard there is trying to capsize the boat. And this is in the Straits of Tierra del Fuego, not Tierra del Fuego, Straits of Juan de Fuca, okay, off Vancouver Island in December. We didn't know how the boat was going to handle, but here we go. He's in a dry suit, by the way. He did survive. So we had worked out a boarding protocol, and this is the next thing. If you are going outside, right, pop, she's up, that's designed in. And what he's just pulled out there is a lanyard with a Pony Club plastic stirrup on it. We've since refined the system considerably, but back on board, typically 30 seconds from hitting the water, he's got the boat upright and sailing. Now, if you're choosing a cruising dinghy, think about that. You need to be able to get out of the water. The water down here can get quite cold. Yeah, I didn't go swimming, but a lot did. They're braver than me. Offset centerboard, by the way. The boat down the middle, you've got a seat on each side and a raised floor so that it self-drains. You can lie down in there in a 12-foot sailing dinghy. The offset board, which is in here.
You just have to move on a bit, John.
Yep.
We're going to run out of time. We need to get some
Cool.
questions. So we'll
Yep.
move on through the Scamp into the
So
long steps.
this is now my girlfriend's boat before we bought it. So yeah, offset board doesn't make any difference. Goes really well. Next boat.
So John's next boat is the long steps. Which
Long
is,
steps.
I think this had the toughest customer, did it not?
Me. The years keep adding up, you know, and I look at my birthdays and I think, how on earth did that happen? But then I think, you know, only lucky people get to be older. There are a lot of people who don't. So I still felt that the life-defining adventure was still hanging out there. So I designed this as, and you can see it's got the Scamp cuddy. You can see that it's rowing well. You can see that the sail area, the rig is well clear of the rowing station and that it rows nicely. So I designed it as an extended coastal cruising dinghy, right? An open boat. So I've got the shelter, I've got the clear rowing space, the offset board is there again. It's narrow on the waterline, it's long on the waterline. They row really nicely. I won a rowing race in mine just recently, and when I sat down and added up the total weight that I was moving, it was almost half a tonne. It was a 500-metre race, and it was supposed to be a dinghy race, and I beat the fastest of the dinghies by about a boat length. And then I sat and rested for a few minutes. But yeah, so this is Long Steps, as I say, designed as an extended coastal voyager. I haven't succeeded in capsizing it yet, and I've tried with 2 people, as you saw in the Scamp video, and we couldn't get it over. It is also water ballasted, but a bigger tank. The shape is such that it contributes to its stability. The side decks and coamings contribute considerably. You've got to go a long way over, and this is something to think about when you look at the standard dinghy with its little double rails and no side deck. You put the gunnel under and that, you've got water inside. These boats are almost completely on their side. Scamps are the same, Navigators are the same. So that's a safety issue. So as they go over, they'll float maybe 45 degrees quite comfortably with no water inside. So all of those are designed in, and including my sleeping space, including enough headroom underneath the cuddy for me to sit in there, including the galley being on the back of one of the hatch doors into the storage compartment forward. I open it up and there's the trangia. The boat will heave to in a really bad situation. I've had it in metre-high breaking short seas, hove to, just pull the mizzen in, let everything else go, let the tiller go, including the rudder being offset, right, in a steering position. The boat stayed head to wind while I went up forward, put the trangia on, put the kettle on, had a rest, had a cup of tea, had a little hot meal. Okay, we're ready to go again, and I can make good decisions again because I'm no longer tired. So here's one being built, my one, in fact. Construction method is within the skill range of the average builder. I don't consider myself to be an expert, but of course I know what the designer intended. So very simple stuff. No one job in that boat is difficult. There's a lot of jobs, but they're all simple ones, right? We have a couple of people here who are at Scamp Camp number 1, and they're still sailing their boat. How many years later? 10 years. 10 years? Yep. And how many miles?
Actually, never added it up, but my Navigator tracks that have been recorded are just over 3,000 miles.
Just over 3,000 miles in a boat they built themselves, not having built a boat before. Yep, you can do it. And it's safe. They haven't had any really major frights with it. It's looking after them, and they've done 3,000 odd miles of adventuring in a safe boat, one that came safe from the designer's drawing board. Right, long steps. You have to be able to dry your boat out. Many of the places you'll go for shelter will be drying. Now, I will explain that rudder. That is also a boarding step. The flat plate reduces the boat's tendency to pitch. It also gives the rudder grip. I broke the rudder off one day. I was backing down the ramp, no one else around. The little cord that holds the rudder up let go. The rudder hit the ground, broke off. I had 3 days and I was desperate to go cruising. So I went sailing with no rudder blade, with just that, what you see there. And it steers. It's intended to steer at speed in very shallow water. Again, a safety issue. If I'm coming down the west coast of New Zealand, and that's very similar to your west coast here in Tassie, if things go really, really wrong and there are no options, I can run up the beach. If you try and run up the beach with the rudder down, you'll lose control because you'll hit the bottom. That will steer at speed, surfing. So you can see there, plenty of stability, stand up and walk around in it. That again is important. If you're going to do long cruises in your cruising dinghy, you must have a number of alternative positions in which to place your body. Some of them will be seated, some of them will be standing up, some of them may be lying down. But if you're sitting in one position, these pointy bones in your pelvis will get very, very sore. Your muscles will get stiff. You need to be able to move around. So alternative seating positions is part of the issues for the designer in designing a safe and comfortable cruising dinghy. So that's me rowing there, right? Girlfriend's little boy sitting up on the bow. The boat's plenty stable enough to do that, particularly in those conditions, but I was rowing away from the fleet. Now, there's no provision for auxiliary power on that boat other than rowing. You can see that the rowing rig is completely out of the rowing station. So I can row efficiently and effectively. Even the after edge of the cuddy roof is far enough forward so that when I'm pulling hard, I don't clout the back of my head on it. So the first thing that was drawn for that boat was the rowing station. The seat height, the foot height, the height of the rowlocks, the width of the rowlocks, and I could go on about designing a rowing station for, again, another hour or so, but I won't. But it's science. It's all worked out as to wrist displacement, forearm movement, how far you can pull, how hard you can pull, where the footrests have got to go, what height everything is relative to each other. And I've got spreadsheets to work it all out so that it's right first time for the 95 percentile average height, right? It varies a little bit for people who are outside that, but they will normally tell me and I can adjust it.
I think we're ready for some questions, John.
Yeah, we had a question over here.
So just with the questions, I'll come and give you the microphone so the people that are stuck out the back can hear what's going on.
Could those of you asking questions speak directly into the top of the mic so the poor people in the overflow room who aren't here can also hear you? Thank you.
My question, John, is you're talking about the risk of capsizing when heading downwind. Does a gaff sail enable you to depower the top of the sail a bit even when you're running downwind? Or is it no real effect then?
No. One of the issues with lug sails and gaffs in particular on unstayed masts is when you're running downwind at speed, if you're letting the sail out further and further, which is a tendency, there's two issues. One is it's blowing harder than you think because you're running away from the wind. If you're doing 6 knots away from a 20-knot wind, you're in a 14-knot breeze on the back of your neck. So you tend to underestimate. The other is that as the sail goes forward, think about the thrust vector of the sail. So you're going upwind, it's driving you to windward. Even though it's only just off the wind a little bit, off the centre line, the thrust vector is around 40-45 degrees to the width of the sail. It's forward of 90 degrees to the sail. So if you let the sail out and out and out, the yard tends to go forward. Yeah? As the yard goes forward, the thrust vector of the sail will be across the boat to windward, to the side that you're sitting on. And the boat may well roll over towards you, right? And that is, you'll be totally not expecting that. It's unexpected. You'd normally think, okay, the wind's blowing over this shoulder and I'm running downwind and I'll let the sail out because it's a bit gusty, and all of a sudden the boat rolls towards you. Not prepared at all. So not a good idea. So if you're running downwind at speed in a really big blow with an unstayed mast and all of the laser sails, who's sailed a laser? Yeah, you'd know. When do you capsize? Downwind. Yep. So you'll roll the boat over. So, yeah, if you're doing that, pull the vang on hard, round up a little bit, but pull it in, pull the sail in a bit.
Do we have another question? You have to be right in the middle.
Thanks. All right. Just wondering, my understanding was that the Scamp was designed to a minimum length, I think, for regulations originally. But if you fast forward that to a trip and the requirements of something like Howard Rice, where he wants to run up beaches, you know, to get away from weather, would it be more optimum to have a lightweight boat, or a boat being more lightweight that was not so short and compact, it was a lot longer, maybe a little bit more like long steps? Would that be a more optimised design for that sort of operation?
Well, Howard is vastly experienced. He was the first man to take a kayak around Cape Horn, and it was a Klepper folding kayak. And the expedition took 4 months and 2 years of training to be able to cope with the hardships of the voyage. He decided that Scamp fitted. He had 3 months worth of provisions on that boat, and this is 3 months worth of extreme climate provisions stowed in the boat, and you couldn't see any of it. That was a major issue, is the weight and volume of stores, the weight and volume of safety equipment. For example, he had Duckworks beach rollers, which are about 1.2 by 300, and he had 2 of them strapped to the roof inside the cuddy when he was sailing. He had 3 anchors and something like 400 metres of anchor line on board. He had spare sails, he had a spare tent, he had a pack raft kayak, right, inflatable kayak on board. And a long, slender boat, very difficult to get that amount of storage. Does that answer? Cool. We had a question over here. This gentleman here with the cap.
Thanks very much. It's been fantastic.
Turn your volume up, please.
I might get booed out of the auditorium, but I went with a Vivier design, and I must admit I was very interested in the Navigator when I was trying to choose. And I wondered if you'd have any comments about the sort of comparison between something like a Vivier Allure and Navigator.
Yeah, Navigator.
Okay. Who here has watched Roger Barnes' videos? Yeah, very popular. Now, Roger goes cruising, estuary cruising. He's sneaking up muddy creeks, he's going into the little villages in France, all those sorts of areas. The Navigator was designed for much rougher conditions. It's structurally much, much stronger, right? Not necessarily in the poking a hole in it, but the total structure is much more rigid and stronger. It also, you can get it a lot further over without the water coming in because of the side decks and the shape. It has higher stability and the rig is more versatile. It's designed for a whole different set of criteria. And what we struck on the raid, there was an Allure that did really, really well, was keeping up with us a lot of the time. But ultimately, the Navigator's designed for those conditions. So, build one.
John, can you hear me?
Yep.
After your experience on solid air and sailing with a balanced lug, are you, first of all, what's your opinion of the lug sail, and will you be adding it to your design portfolio?
That's a good thought. Now, that particular boat, Matt's boat, was set up with an existing sail, which is smaller than optimum, but he's going to leave it like it is because one of the co-owners of the boat is less experienced and it will suit him as it is. It scooted along pretty well. We weren't last. We were able to keep up at times with the Bay Raider fleet, which is a considerably longer boat with a lot more rag on it. But yes, I will be. Now, the rig is really good in that it keeps the whole middle of the boat clear. So that's very helpful. So particularly for family cruising, right? You've got big clear space in the middle. You haven't got a boom too close over your head. You haven't got masts in the way. Sailing with a mast in the middle of the boat, the thing's a real obstruction when you stop. But balanced lug sails, I've tried just about every kind of sail, including a large parasol on the tin canoes that I built when I was 9 and 10, right? A beach umbrella, very effective actually. I've tried just about every configuration of sail known to mankind, including crab claws, yep, and lateens and so on. And I really like the balanced lug sail. It's powerful, It's closer winded than people think, it's more tunable than people think, and it jibes softly and very powerful off the wind.
Another question.
Can I just ask what height of the coaming contributes to that stability? The deck width I get, but I noticed that some of your designs have got more, a variable amount of height of coaming above the side decks. To what extent does that contribute to the safety?
Okay, well, one of the safety issues is if you're going to sit out on the boat and it's got a high coaming, it gets pretty painful after about 30 seconds. Yep. So the lower ones are generally where the boat is either got to be rowed or you're going to spend some time sitting out. But the if you think of the side planking and then the side deck and then a vertical member, you've got an I-beam structure which makes the boat very, very strong. Yeah? And so they do several things. One is it helps keep the water out. One is that for certain boats, it helps the fatigue issue. And for other boats, all of them really, it contributes immensely to the strength of the boat.
Hey, listen, there's a rumour going on in the festival here. I just want to.
You're
see
going
if
to have
it's
to
true or
shout,
not.
Ross.
Yeah, you had such. Can you hear me there? Yeah, there's a rumour going on. You've had such a great trip the last 10 days with Matt, and the festival's being so successful. I've heard. I don't know whether this is true or not, but I need it confirmed.
He's my new dad.
John? Are you moving from New Zealand over to Tassie? Is that true?
Look, there's an awful lot of anchors holding me home, but I'm very, very keen to visit again. Thank you. Just to, are we up to time? Yeah. Okay, just to say thank you. Thank you to Matt for bringing me over. Thank you for all of the people that I've met for such a warm welcome. Thank you, thank you. And thank you in absentia to my partner Anna, who stayed at home with work, her children and her study, could not come, would love to have been here, but thanks to her for letting me come.